The men's national football team, Bafana Bafana, is always outdone by the men's national rugby team, the Springboks. I'll admit, football is much bigger globally and competitive, but the gap between the two is too big. So why is this the case? Well, it's not a talent thing. I mean, a top Belgian team just signed a South African 18-year-old, and we produce talent and have done so for some time. Rather, the history of rugby has set it up for success. The history of football has set it up for failure. As with many problems in the world, if you want to blame anyone, okay, maybe not that simple. South Africa has had time to address football's problems and learn from other sports. So why haven't we? We're going to look at the following: the current state of football versus rugby, how we got here, and why we're still stuck here. A typical football Premier League game in South Africa looks a bit like this, and a typical rugby league game looks like this. You'd think there was no money in football, yet the players are among the highest paid on the continent, with the league attracting players from Brazil, Nigeria, Serbia, Venezuela, Argentina, and many other countries. We even hosted a phenomenal World Cup, but oops. So what's wrong? Well, we have to talk about sport development and sporting culture. Look at these schools. Big difference, right? Rugby schools are seemingly better organized with well-supported competitions such as Craven Week, which pits the best school teams against each other. While this does exist in football, the gap between the best schools and the worst is inexplicably huge.
My role is a sports chairperson. The development, the league, the setup is not well done. There's no frequent games for the little ones at that age. It's not compared to where I come from. The evidence is the ground. Lotte ENC, I think it's about 15 to 20 years into this facility because it will benefit the three schools and the community. That's why it's one of
so
the
that school
is Valmansdal. It's a secondary.
Yeah,
this
and
is,
then
junior secondary school.
Your school.
And that one is Putanam Primary School.
Oh, so this was supposed to serve
all three schools, including the community as well. But some other schools, we don't have jerseys and so all such things because of their budget for sports doesn't cater for all those things. So
why are they buses? No, you saw.
Why the buses? They are currently for now. Valmans is using the ground to park here since they don't have a depot.
I'm the head coach of the school under 17 and 19 soccer. These are our facilities. We are building more as well. It's a multi-purpose ground. You have your rugby and football here. You know, the school told me, you know what, coach, here's a plan. We want you to run with it. My team manager. Then since 2019 till now, the plan is doing very well. The first 3 years of the plan, the aim was not to win. Or not to compete, but just to build the boys. Then now that's where we are competing and winning. Like for example, now we have Kemotepe coming up. It's an under 19 tournament. It's a national tournament. It's a private school. You know, everything needs to be top notch. The expectations are high. You have to represent the brand.
Now pay attention to this. Those two school football fields I showed you, they're in the same township, an area that's way below middle income on average. But the second school is a private school owned by a company that's got these school branches across the country. They cost more, but have better facilities. This is important when you consider that South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world. Access is seldom granted for all. Public schools remain at a disadvantage for football development. In contrast, historically white public schools, so-called former Model C schools, with rugby have a better chance of doing well and providing access for their students. This has opened them up to inclusion in the broader progress of the sport, development initiatives, and private sector funding. I recently went to a school rugby tournament and mate, they've got Toyota as a sponsor. They even brought their cars because they target audiences here. Then I went to a school football tournament on the same day. Do you see any major sponsors here? By the way, it's like a 10-minute drive away. It's common for such schools to have both rugby and football, but football just isn't taken as seriously. To understand this dynamic, we need to get into South Africa's complex history with both these sporting codes. So, how did we get here? I told you the British were coming. In 19th century Britain, rugby was played in elite schools. It was the gentleman's game. Football was the common man's game. Once exported to countries like South Africa, Well, this had an impact on how the locals were treated. From 1849, schools like Bishop's in Cape Town were established by the Brits and quickly became the center of rugby in SA. The first official rugby game in the country was played at Bishop's, and such schools remain crucial to rugby in South Africa. KwaZulu-Natal was a football place. They had the Indian Football Association, and Bushbucks Football Club was established there in 1902. A few years before, a black South African football team actually toured Europe. Black people would come to love football, like much of the world. Its popularity among British soldiers during the Anglo-Zulu and Anglo-Boer wars contributed to its spread among black communities who had limited access to rugby's institutions anyway. Whereas rugby quickly became Afrikaans and white. Why? Well, it was embedded in schools and social structures dominated by white settlers. So, football was eventually perceived as lower class and the black man's sport. They would come to shun football, especially after those British concentration camps during the war. After the war, it became central to national and racial identity for Afrikaners and was used for state PR. The state promoted rugby and funded it well. They put all the sport development structures in place for white-only schools, while football struggled in townships. So with apartheid, the government used rugby as PR to prove racial superiority. Eventually though, much of the world just said, we don't like how you're treating your people, so we're not going to play with you. Fast forward some decades, apartheid ends. Football and rugby have two different paths. Nelson Mandela sees an opportunity to use rugby for social cohesion when South Africa hosts the third ever World Cup and wins it. People still had the apartheid flag and sang the old anthem at the stadium. Yeah. Though suddenly, rugby is under pressure. It has to prove it can become part of the new South Africa. These guys have a tour of the country, visiting disadvantaged communities and building development programs. You gotta remember, for rugby, establishing development programs was nothing new. In addition to that, South Africa would later introduce a quota system to increase representation of all South Africans in the team. Yeah, a lot of white Afrikaans people didn't like that. But look at the 1995 and the 2023 World Cup winning teams. The team now represents most of South Africa. Football, on the other hand, was quite unprepared to compete globally. We had an awesome team in 1996 and won the Africa Cup of Nations tournament. Then a long slump. By the way, this tournament was also held in South Africa a year after the Rugby World Cup. Was it as influential? Nah. In 2010, South Africa hosted the Football World Cup, where we couldn't get past the group stages. It would later be revealed that FIFA and the South African bidding delegation had some corruption and shenanigans going on to make it happen. If you don't know, FIFA is pretty dodgy. With all the flaws and injustices in this history, you have to admit, rugby's development has remained spectacular.
Yeah, girls rugby under 15, they took the nationals 4 years back.
Your school?
Yeah, my school. We are the champions for under 15. And 2 years back, we are the semi-finalists.
What do you think made that work? That is not applicable to football.
Yeah, fortunately, it's because of Bulls.
Is it? Habana scored! The Vodacom Bulls.
The federation is so professional and it takes the development so serious. That's why you can see with rugby, we have many players from Pretoria. As well. It's just like Eastern Cape. That's why Pretoria and Eastern Cape in terms of the development in rugby.
What did the Bulls do for your girls here in terms of development?
Development, always the training, we pay nothing. One of the things that I was crying, I was complaining with is the same things like financial support in terms of the jerseys, the soccers. Bulls, they supply everything, the training, even they supply us with a coach. Even that's how they take their development. They even supply their buses to take the kids to train, to Bulls, to practice. All these things, I have all the material. In that one, the federation, the development, it takes it serious.
And then in soccer?
In soccer, SAFA is not doing that much. You can see the evidence. I'm not saying it's doing nothing, but I can never say we have the evidence of it.
Rugby continues to make many South Africans proud. There's definitely something to learn here for football, which does seem quite stuck. Football has struggled to overcome some major barriers, but I want to focus on just two. First, the class divide you saw earlier. Then, the lack of development in football culture. If you read any of the life stories of our football heroes, they are filled with tough upbringing, poverty, and just sad realities. This is not to say these don't exist in other sports, but in football, they seem part of the furniture. The structures just aren't in place to fast-track development, to go pro. This has inevitably created room for exploitation and corruption, where youngsters are forced to pay to play. This also speaks to access to the culture, paying to go to games, having games close to home, local clubs, and. So what is happening with football culture?
I used to have a huge problem with when it comes to parents not supporting their children. You will have a sports field and a rugby field. And during the difference between the two is that a soccer field, kwena, bana, and 1-2 parents. When you look at the rugby field, it's surrounded by parents, gazebos, parents are there, it's packed. So first of all, before we can come to saying that football doesn't have much sponsors compared to your rugby, but we also blame it on parents as well. For us as Curo, our parents are 100% on board. Our players have whatever resources they need to practice, to train.
What is your biggest problem?
My biggest problem is the support from the parents.
Do you think they take it seriously?
No, they only take, but we can never blame the parents. I mean, they were produced by the system that only make us to see academically. We only judge a person by academics, and our parents are suffering from that. We should also be understanding or why they still have that. We have to unlearn those things.
In the context of inequality and class divisions in South Africa, you can imagine it just isn't easy for some parents to show up. For the majority of South Africa, how do you choose between soccer boots and groceries? So, this is what I mean when I say the history of rugby set it up for success, and the history of football set it up for failure. We can talk about the level of competition that football has versus rugby and how a country of South Africa's size obviously won't be at the top, but this is not that story. This is an ode to all the stars of South African football that never kicked a ball in a professional league. This video is for that guy. Sadly, we will never know him. If you've gotten to this part of the video, I want you to know that I left out women's football deliberately. Given the amazing progress they've made and the unique challenges that they face, I think that should be a video on its own. Also, if you're interested in the full interviews of the coaches, I'll put them in the playlist on the channel. You can check that out. All right, what a judge.